episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime, and sometimes they are legends, and that is what you're getting tonight. I can guarantee you unequivocally you will not get guests like this anywhere else on planet Earth. From here to Bangladesh, you're not going to be getting any better guests. So that is the opening, and I just want to start off. Obviously, we're going to dive into this, and I'm going to introduce the guests in a moment. I have personally been disturbed because I scour X all day. It's a good news source, obviously. However, there has been just a crazy amount of hate, for lack of a better term, towards this fallen CEO. You can come at me for this, but no one deserves to be murdered in cold blood the way he was. You might disagree with the healthcare system. That's one issue. The family is speaking out tonight via a statement to CARE, the local NBC affiliate in Minneapolis, saying that Brian was an incredibly loving, generous, talented man who truly lived life to the fullest and touched so many lives. We appreciate your condolences and request complete privacy as our family moves through this difficult time. He will be greatly missed. Just 50 years old. This is obviously a shot of him here before he left us way too soon. Best guests. Again, if you guys are just tuning in for the first time, you guys are in for a treat tonight. Dr. Ann Burgess. She is an internationally recognized pioneer in the assessment and treatment of victims of trauma and abuse. She is the author of A Killer by Design, Murders, Mind Hunters, and My Quest to Decipher the Criminal Mind. Among her many awards and accolades, in 2016, she was named a living legend by the American Academy of Nursing. There was just a Hulu show called Mastermind that profiled, pun intended, all of Ann's work, and she literally sort of changed the course of law enforcement when it comes to profiling, as did Agent Gregg McCrary. He entered on duty with the FBI as a special agent back on December 1st, 1969. He doesn't like when I say this, but I was 5 months old.
That's okay. I was stalking mafiosi around the streets of New York while you were in diapers, so I'm totally good with that. No problem.
He was associated with the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime since its inception back in '85. He too has authored numerous publications, including The Unknown Darkness, profiling the predators among that. And he wrote that with Dr. Catherine Ramsland, who obviously has done a lot of work with the BTK serial killer and now infamously taught Brian Kohberger, who is going to go on trial for those horrific murders in Idaho. Last, certainly not least, you've got Tom Simon. He served the FBI for 26 years as a special agent with an expertise in white-collar crime investigations and sensitive national security matters. He is a certified public accountant, a forensic accountant, and a licensed private investigator, and he can speak to some of the issues with his DOJ investigation. Look, normally I'm not cocky, and this has nothing to do with me, but this panel is gold. It's because of them, not because of me. And like I said, from here to Bangladesh, no one's going to have a better panel. So tune in, and despite the horrific subject matter, I hope that you appreciate the material here. So Dr. Ann Burgess, to you, obviously you're a Bostonian. You teach up at Boston College and is still an active professor at BC. You hear this on the news. With your background, your expertise, what runs through your mind initially?
Well, this was taught my last class yesterday, and I brought this case to the class to kind of see what they had learned over the semester in looking at cases. And so I'll be talking a little bit about what they had to say, the young students. But it certainly was it was horrific when I ever heard how and what happened, that this could happen so, if you will, easily at 6:45 on a weekday morning. No, and when we watch the video, you don't see anybody around hardly. So I was surprised. This is Midtown Manhattan, all of that. It was just horrific, and I thought this was a very important case. Not even necessarily knowing who it was and the work that he did. Of course, once I heard he was in healthcare, I was even more interested in the case because that's my field too. So. So I thought this is going to be a very important case, and how to get the shooter. That's the key thing, and how easily he got away.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions, and SGS Nation is going to dive in. If you have questions for the esteemed panel, put them in a triple Q. Gregg, to you, Ann mentioned the video. I'm going to pull it up. Just going to play it. There's no audio here. The first time you saw this, you see what appears to be a silencer. I know that's not a technical term. But for lack of a better term, when you first watch this, you're obviously watching this with a much different eye than I am, or quote unquote civilians. What did you see here on this video? When you saw it the first time, and what are you seeing now?
Right. I mean, there are a couple of things. Clearly, this is a cold predatory act, just going after this guy. Now, whether it's a personal thing or whether it's a larger thing, that's the issue of victimology, which is going to be important. What elevated his potential for becoming the victim of violence? Clearly, I mean, it could be his position with the healthcare, or is it something personal? We don't know. But then that gets into the inscriptions on the shell casings that had been recovered, which go to this sort of deny and delay and that sort of thing, go to the criticisms of healthcare industries like his, which delay and deny, coverage on things. But the question is that the motive? Is it straightforward, or is that staging? Is that there to misdirect the investigation in some way? And, for example, I had a case years ago with the Bureau with the kidnapping of Sidney Riso, president of Exxon International. The initial demand letter was like all environmental stuff and Greenpeace and all that, which turned out to be, bullshit, to be frank about it. And it was just a money-hungry couple that was doing it. So you have to be careful about locking on to a motive, too soon on these things. And I would raise one other issue that goes to more of the firearms thing. And this is just with me. I don't know what anybody else is thinking, but they're talking about a jam, and it does appear as though he's manipulating the weapon, but between shots. But then what I would keep in mind is there is a weapon. There is a 9mm weapon out there. Just like that is what I'm talking about. Yeah. It's a bolt action where it screws and you pull back, and it has a silencer attached, and you can buy it for a couple of grand. I wouldn't overlook that possibility as well, that it isn't necessarily a jam, but it could be this other type of weapon, and that could be a lead. I mean, to me, that's a lead that needs to be covered and either ruled in or ruled out, because that's a very unique, if it is, that's a very unique kind of weapon. The backpack, actually, it was so funny when that came up. I looked at the backpack and I go, that's by Peak Design. That is the everyday backpack. It's a 30-liter because I have one. I go, well, damn, that's, it's my pack he's got on there. So that jumped out at me, more on the personal issue right away.
Yeah. And those bags, all these agents do well, man. They work, they get good, but those bags are like $330.
They're expensive. It's marketed to photographers primarily, and that's a hobbyist. That's why I have that particular bag, because you can, customize the internal layout to put in different gear and so forth. But other people could have it as well. But that's all potential lead material to be sorted out.
Yeah, this right here, just if you watch for a second, this is what Gregg's talking about. Right after this still, he moves and he starts to kind of hit the gun right there.
Right.
That's where people think that it's either what Gregg is saying, that it's a gun built that way, where you have to operate that way, or the gun jammed and you had to unjam it.
Right.
I promise I am coming to you, Tom, but this came up earlier, Ann Burgess. Has this crossed your mind at all? Some people thought that the shooter looked like a female. It's something that it didn't even cross my mind.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this?
I thought the same thing. I had to look really careful, and I wondered if it was a female, especially when you see you're going to later. Yeah, that one, because it looks like a female in that kind of brown tan.
Yeah, the second from the left.
From the left. And it did cross my mind. I don't think it is.
Yeah.
But initially, I for a minute, that's what I thought. Could it have been a female?
Yeah. Tom, to you, your expertise is multifaceted, but again, you handle a lot of white collar crime. So I'm going to ask you about the DOJ stuff in a moment. But when you look at these photos here, and I was asking some NYPD retired officers earlier, you don't see the same things generally that the public is seeing. When you're looking at these, what are you looking at, or what are you looking for?
Well, I mean, again, this whole thing feels so professional, but then this is a guy walking around without gloves on, showing his face on camera, apparently the same morning, going to a Starbucks. It turns out he was staying at a Upper West Side youth hostel with the fake New Jersey driver's license. So he's making a lot of amateurish mistakes, but the hit itself just feels so professional. Dovetailing off of what Gregg was saying regarding the gun, I think the gun that Gregg's referring to is a B&T Station 6. It was known it was known in Great Britain in World War II as the well rod pistol. And it has a long barrel and it's 9mm, and it fires a single shot. Then you have to rack it, like we were taught at the FBI, to tap, rack, bang. And so I don't think what we're talking about here is a malfunction. I think it's a well rod pistol. Now, the pistol was very popular for spies to assassinate people, because it's the closest thing to a true silencer out there on the market, because it's custom built for that. So it's not a jamming gun, but it really only fires one round at a time. And it was used for veterinary purposes, for if you wanted to shoot at your livestock in the head to put them down without freaking out the other cows. And the good news, though, is that this is not a very popular gun. It's only been around for about 5 years on the commercial market. It's not a Glock or a Smith & Wesson. So the ATF should be able to produce a report on U.S. purchases in about 10 minutes. And then you have to think, okay, so even with the well rod, any gun with a suppressor first of all, there's no suppressors for sale whatsoever in the state of New York, understanding that people can buy guns illegally. And if you came to my free state of Florida and wanted to buy a suppressor, you're on a 6-month waiting list to get the ATF check. And so there's just a lot that goes into this that just feels very professional to me. And we can talk about some of my conspiracy theories as to why that might be in a minute, but that's my initial thoughts.
Okay. And we're going to get to all that. I'm going to obviously ask the guests about the etchings. Some say they're etchings on the bullet and bullet casings. Some say that it was written with markers. Going to ask, obviously, the obvious questions, what's the motivation potentially, the profile, literally, the age, those sorts of things. But a little bit of news to get to. This came out since our earlier show this afternoon. And I'll address this to Gregg. A fake bomb threat targeted the Minnesota home of Brian Thompson. It happened roughly 12 hours after the 50-year-old father was murdered outside this Hilton hotel. They thought that there was a package in a mailbox as well. They saw a woman coming by. They checked, nothing. Is that anything to look at, or is that just sort of a typical, copycat or intimidation tactic after a high-profile crime like this?
Yeah, I mean, I would think it's just a reaction to the shooting, and some whack job just decided to phone in a bomb threat or do something like that. I don't know that it's related, but again, it's something you have to investigate and you have to take a look at. before you can, make a final determination. But, I think it's that kind of thing. It's a reactive thing. And that's the other thing. I'm just kind of free associating here, but these things, these high profile events, whether they're school shootings or workplace violence or something, there's a contagion factor. And this is why I think executive protection in the private sector should be on alert. And I think they are. I think this has gotten everybody's attention, that there may be somebody else on the brink. It doesn't necessarily have to be healthcare. It could be anything, but some guy on the brink of wanting to settle a score or make a statement, and they're motivated by this. So over the next week or two, I'd be very careful for executives or anybody, and certainly the folks in executive protection need to be on alert in the immediate future because of this copycat factor.
Yeah, I have a friend, obviously not going to say his name, but he's a high ranking attorney for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and sent him a text message, said lay low, but they are taking it really seriously, as they should be. Patricia Banks here, thank you for the super chat. To Dr. Burgess, would a pro/hitman stay at such a public place? This is hostel he reportedly stayed at. Just very quickly, search warrants were executed. Yeah. He was staying at this hostel, apparently on the Upper West Side, and had, according to reports, 2 strangers staying with him. And what about that? In terms of profiling, who's going to stay at a hostel?
Right. That, I think that's a clue. That's something that's important. Whether it was designed that way, we don't know, but we'd have to look at it both ways, because people that were there, I think there's been some talk about, now they're frightened because they said it was a type of situation where you're all sleeping kind of a one room. It's not private rooms or anything. So that, but evidently nothing happened that would cause any suspicion. This is all after the fact that it came up. We're saying at that international. I think the fact that it was an international hostel was important too. That could this person? There's been some talk about, was this just a hit type of situation, and if so, was it set up that way to throw people off? I think all of those things are going to be important to look at.
It's fascinating to me because this is obviously very much an active investigation. I mean, the manhunt is still on. This person could be literally anywhere from Lee to Tom Simon. Do you think authorities already know the suspect's name? Do you think they have him identified? Obviously, it's not something that they would want to release to the public right away, but what are your thoughts?
I see this getting solved in the next 24 hours. What the police know in any moment in time is difficult to say. But this guy made so many mistakes along the way for what appeared to be a very professional hit, that there's got to be a great paper trail. I mean, even coming down to, it wasn't a fake ID he was using. He was using someone else's New Jersey driver's license to stay at that hostel. And they got to have fingerprints on this guy. And again, I believe he had some military or police training in his life that probably wound up being fingerprinted. I see this as a 24-hour case. I would bet you dinner.
At least we got the profilers on before that. But obviously we want him to get caught, and, just super curious about this. Philadelphia shoulder surgeon, one of our really good friends. I was at a Phillies game with her this summer. Haven't seen you in ages. I'm glad you're back. Gregg, thoughts on if the guy was on his flight from Minnesota to New York City? Brian did live, the CEO, in Minnesota. I assume that they would be checking a flight manifest and cross-referencing it.
Right. I'm sure they would be. But that kind of brings up an important point, because clearly this shooter had intel to know where the victim was staying at that particular hotel, which wasn't the hotel where the conference was, and that he would be coming out. He got there just within a few minutes before he came out. Now, was he lucky, or did he have some inside information about when this guy was moving and when he was about to leave the hotel? But clearly there was, he had some sort of intel on this guy, and whether he followed him from Minnesota or what, we really don't know at this point. But clearly that's going to be an avenue of investigation. Is how did he know where the victim was staying? How did he know when he was coming out? Unless he just got lucky and got there 5 minutes before. But even then, the conference was at like 9 or 9:30, and he's out there at 6:45. So that just speaks of to me, some kind of information that he had, and that's going to be a big investigative avenue.
Yeah, and there's so much to dig into here. COE, please leave this comment up. Gregg, I'm coming back because there's late reporting too from the New York Times. Earlier, they said, look, we got a water bottle, some power bars, and some other kind of wrapper that they were able to pull. But they're saying that on the water bottle, this is a law enforcement official talking to CNN, that they did get a print, but it's smudged, making it less conclusive. What about a smudged fingerprint? Can that help at all?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you can get DNA off of that potentially. Smudged it is, I don't know. They may be able to do some basic patterning or narrowing things down to a certain degree on the ridge bearing imprints and the latent prints that may be there. Or if it's just smudged, you still have the potential of DNA, as you would on the wrappers or the cell phone that they think he discarded. So all of that is in play, and I'm sure it's working. And I agree that I don't think this is going to be a long case. I think, one of the big clues are those good facial shots of this individual. Yeah. Whoever knows him. And those calls are coming into the PD now, and they're going to triage those things a couple of ways. One, by how many people give the same name, or if a name comes in and then there's some connect, say this guy is known to have made threats or whatever. I mean, these are the things they're going to do in triage and develop suspects right away. So I agree. I don't think this thing is going to be unsolved for too long.
Yeah. Linda Vergata, Dr. Burgess, you were talking about this. We don't have the video because it's at the point where he falls, and we don't want to show that. But they're asking, what about the person standing on the right on the wall, and then there's a person in the SUV? And I'm going to pull up the video again. Dr. Burgess, there was literally a person just cowering in the corner, and the shooter 100% saw that person. You can see him there briefly. Yes. If you go back right here, you see that person kind of wedged in where that, the overhang is. But what's it tell you that, I mean, obviously the shooter had a very clear shot on that person, clear visibility. What's it tell you that he or she was completely ignored?
Right. That if this was somebody that was worried about witnesses, that person would have been gone, I think. And so that person could have seen him come between the cars and back into that corner. But you do in another video, you can see that person just leave. It's, I think, a female. Is it a female or a male?
Yeah, I think it's a female. I believe it's a female.
The other thing is, what about his jacket? He's got a jacket, not a coat. Doesn't it look like a jacket? And it's cold. So he either just, and it could be because he's just at another hotel and just has to walk across the street or something. I mean, that's what one report said, that he was staying at another hotel. So he just thought he could just slip right in, and should have, without anyone bothered. But I thought that coat was interesting, that he didn't have a heavy coat, so that he wasn't expecting any heavy weather. But in the four photos that you have on the screen right now, you've got a good shot of his on that left hand figure. That's a pretty clear shot. As I would absolutely agree that somebody should be able to identify that. And who's the person in the tan?
Well, these are all purport. This is interesting that you asked that, because they're all purported to be this alleged shooter. So the first two pictures are apparently from the hostel, taken from surveillance video. You can see, Gregg and Tom will talk about this. He's leaning on the counter, so there's probably fingerprint evidence there. And then the two on the right, and you see on the very far right, he's holding what appears to be a cell phone. And police did recover a burner phone, so that's important. But Tom Simon, when you look at this, do these four people all look like the same person? Because a lot of people don't think they do.
Well, it's clearly that the backpack is the right backpack on that correct side. Yeah, I mean, the guys on the two guys on the left are clearly the same guy. I think the lighting's different, so it sort of altered the color of the jacket. But I'm going to trust the police that they're not going to put these four photos out just on pure speculation. This has got to be the guy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They'll also be.
Yeah,
they'll
Greg,
also-
go ahead,
yeah,
Greg.
They'll also be pulling up a lot of facial recognition databases, trying to match this face up with faces from TSA security at airports, from different databases and things. So that's another lead that I'm sure is being pursued at this point.
Greg, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but you
Go for
entered,
it.
as we said, the FBI in 1969. I can tell you that's 55 years ago. What keeps you so interested and excited, about looking at a case like this so many years later?
I don't. It's. I think it gets in your DNA. Once you get into it, it's addictive. In a way. I hope a positive way. Where you just want to stay involved to a degree and help out if you can. And I don't know. It just gives me a reason to get up in the morning. So.
Yeah, that's all. That's great. If we look at this, we're getting new information. I always say, best guess, you see it behind me, better community. Getting new information, presuming that this is correct. The killer and traveled by bus from Atlanta to New York. We also know that he was in New York City, they're saying, for approximately 10 days before the shooting. What, if anything, does that tell you?
Well, I think that's getting into how did he know that this was going to happen, that this, the conference and all of that, and the inside information, I think, as Greg said, he or she really has to have some inside information. I still, that female trace is there. And the other thing is goes to Starbucks and gets water, doesn't get coffee unless they just didn't report it. So you've got someone that's very health oriented, probably all kinds of, and stays at hostels and travels by bus. You're beginning to get an idea of the background a little bit on the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There was a really interesting comment that I want to go to Ann about. And this is by no way an endorsement of this comment that I'm about to put up, but it's interesting because this is in the news every day and it's a very divisive issue. IGG Rocks is a friend of the show. And is there a possible connection between this crime and the Supreme Court hearing about transgender health rights for children and teens? There's a huge debate going on about that. Could it be someone?
Right. And
could it be a political
that has crossed
motivation?
my mind about the identity of this shooter? Is it possible either a trans or knows something about transgender issues?
Yeah.
Or that now that you get into, because he's in the insurance, does United Health pay for insurance for transgender surgery? I don't know.
I don't know. I do know that they are the highest ranking denier of health benefits of all the insurance companies. Right. They are the number one in terms of denying health benefits. So, Tom Simon, two things. Number one, there's more news, and that is that investigators have reportedly zeroed in on a gun store in Connecticut where they believe the gun was purchased. And that's interesting because we just heard he's coming from Atlanta and now he's in Connecticut. Couple that here with this, his ex-bodyguard says he was baffled that he didn't have security. We heard that he may have had security, but just not with him at the time. Tom, let's start with the first part about that. Look, they know he apparently traveled from Atlanta and they know the gun store. Does that mean they know who it is?
They've got to be getting warm at this point. They probably have a name. I don't know why they're not releasing that to the public. Maybe they're closing in on him somehow. like I said, this thing, it seems like the information over the past, few minutes that we've been talking has been coming fast and furious, which is so nice about your show that you can report this in real time. But yeah, I think this thing's a done deal. It's just a question on when they get their hands on them.
Now also there is new video, which I'm going to play, as soon as I can pull it up here. COE, here it is. They have, New York City is, probably got as many surveillance cameras as they do pigeons, which is a lot. And here's something from the COE. The shooter's travels within New York City are coming into focus. Suspect got to New York City on an interstate bus from the south of the city on November 24th. That's interesting. That could be like the Holland Tunnel. He checked into a hostel on the Upper West Side, checked out on November 29th, and it stops there. Just hearing that information, Gregg McCrary, where do you go with that? And while you're talking, I'm going to play this real quickly. This is news surveillance. This is the newest video out there, captured, I think, by a deli of him coming out of the subway station. So, Gregg, I know I just threw a lot out at you, but what about the fact that he's apparently coming from Atlanta, coming from the south, going up to the north, apparently in Connecticut?
Right. I mean, this is, again, if they know where the gun was purchased and they know the gun, to know where it was purchased from, so that now they've got the gun ID'd, and that could be accomplished different ways. They've got shell casings, and there's ATF has a database, NIBIN, the National Integrated Ballistics Identification, and put that in there, and it can link weapons together based on extraction marks and firing pin impressions, things they would have on the shell casings that came out. So they may have been able to link this to another gun and know that it was purchased in Connecticut. But then the question is, what happened to that gun? I mean, was this killer in Connecticut, or was this gun used somehow ended up in the hands of this guy? I mean, a lot of this has to be sorted out, but I'm with Tom. I mean, this thing is just so burning up so rapidly here. It's, how we may have an answer for we're done tonight.
I think so.
Leo Wren here to Ann. Do the authorities automatically, this is the NYPD, obviously, they have all the resources in the world, but do they automatically call in a profiler, or only if they're hitting dead ends in the investigation, Ann?
I don't, well, first of all, not only if they hit dead end. Well, that has to almost be weeks or months. So we're not anywhere near there. Do they have a profiler on staff? That's the question, I think, is would they call that in, or would they automatically go to the FBI, which would, of course, have a profiler to recommend? I don't know whether Tom or Gregg want to weigh in on that in New York City. What do you think?
Yeah. I can only speak to my time when I covered New York. I mean, I had the East Coast, and I was with NYPD about every 6 months in training and operational support in cases up there. I don't know if that's continued to that degree that I was involved. I worked with Lieutenant Ray Price up there with homicide, my primary contact up there. So whether that liaison is still in place or not, I'm not really I'm not really sure, but we'd certainly be available to jump on board and, help them any way that we could.
Yeah. I was fascinated to learn that, Tom, this is for you, that the NYPD and the FBI have people that just study video and can tell from this whether it is a male or a female. And you see here, Nikki Cudd saying the shooter has an interesting walk. I'm just curious. Did you see that? It's not something, unless it was a very obvious gait, but it looks like he's wearing black and white shoes, maybe his feet pointing out a little bit. But I mean, is that stuff that you're looking at in your days at the FBI at the gate?
I think, it may be a heavy backpack, but I think when you're getting to the very specifics like that, that would be something that you would confirm on the back end if the guy had a leg injury or something like that. Right now, I just feel like NYPD is drinking from a fire hose of actual hard clues to run down, that I don't think they're looking for people who walk funny, or they're turning to profilers or doing any perfectly legitimate things that you would do. I think you do those things after you run down the obvious leads. And I just think there's so many obvious leads for them to run down at this time that they're probably not going to get into the more speculative stuff until they start running out of leads to run down.
Yeah. Gregg, back to this video, and there's a comment here from Sharon. Thank you for the super chat. The guests already kind of talked about this. They think that it is a type of gun, that it wasn't a jamming issue. It was just a type of gun that he was using, which is interesting. But taking this video back, Gregg, and you watch him obviously take the CEO out there. There's this woman on the right, but now this SUV is obviously, there's someone in there. You assume there is, because the lights are on. And look, he just walks super casually right in front of it. He picks up a little, and you see the brake light went off, so he's in there. What do you make of that? Because that to me, that's interesting behavior. I mean, if I just killed someone, I am not walking right in front of the windshield of a car with a driver in it, and he didn't have any interest in killing that guy either.
Right. Yeah. A couple of things that the viewers comment earlier. The fact that there's writing on the shell casings and that they're I think that probably was intentional. I mean, he wanted those things found. And again, whether that's to give the motive or to be staging to misdirect or misguide the investigation. Either way, I think he wanted those things, those shell casings found. Otherwise, why go to the trouble of writing on a small 9mm round if you're not going to display it or use it in some way? So, yeah, I think that that part was intentional, and yeah, but then again, this is very cold and very predatory. I mean, he's not angry. He's just shooting. And it's that sort of predatory violence. It isn't affective. He isn't enraged. He isn't going up and kicking the guy and beating him and shooting him over and over again on the street that would show some sort of uncontrolled rage. This is a guy just casually killing this guy in front of eyewitnesses and just jogging off, from the scene.
Yeah. And Gregg, I mean, to that point, some of the theories out there is maybe this is a person who's upset because a relative did not get, got their insurance denied for, maybe a life-saving operation. Do you feel like that's not who this person is because there's no real rage, there's no anger, it's not it's very impersonal?
Well, it could be both. I mean, because if he has more psychopathic tendencies, that rage can distill down to being very cold and very predatory, where there's no overt sign of anger or rage, but he's just settling this thing, just squaring it. And it deals more with, personality characteristics than, maybe than anything else. So again, we don't know the motive for sure, but that's so cold and so predatory, the way that he's carried that thing out.
Yeah. Some people, again, in the chat saying that those 4 photos are not all the same person. I'm curious. And you heard Tom say that they wouldn't put it out if they weren't almost 100% sure that they were. And Burgess, got to ask you about this. So first they said it was etchings on the bullets and the casings. And then there was a report that it's just like a permanent marker. But we know that whoever it is wrote the words deny, depose, defend. And you juxtapose that with the book cover on the right. This is written by a guy named Jay Feynman. We reached out to him. He had 2 words for us, no comment. He wrote this book back in 2010. It's called Delay, Deny, Defend, Why Insurance Companies Don't Pay Claims and What You Can Do About It. So obviously a book about that subject matter. What's interesting, besides the fact that he's writing on bullets, and he doesn't use the word delay. He's got Depose in there.
Right.
This is way beyond my purview or scope of understanding. What do you see here?
Right. Well, what I see here is moving towards motive. That that's going to be something with healthcare. It's going to be something with being denied. I think that's very much important. That some type of insurance was probably denied. That victimology is tied in with the healthcare. So I think that this is, as already has been said, about the type of leakage, I think is kind of called that way, that he is letting out the grievance that he has. I think the grievance is going to be very, very important. And it may even, because with the hearings going on the whole transgender issue, I think that it's very interesting. That what we don't know is how he knows that the conference, unless this is somebody involved in the healthcare field, which will likely could be. Somebody even said that the backpack that he had looked like one from the one her husband has from Kaiser, that it was a backpack, healthcare backpack. That all of this is starting, I would think, come together for motive. Doesn't necessarily, we haven't found him yet. They haven't found him yet. I think that's the next thing, is how they find it. But certainly is very, very important as to why he was targeted.
And look at this. Dr. Ann has inspired a whole generation of young women. And Ann knows I lectured my kids to be like Ann. But you see Jenny saying, my biggest hero from studying both psychology and nursing, one of the most brilliant minds ever. Dream of meeting her. And by the way, Ann's a couple years older than my mom and still working around the clock. There is no retirement. And right here, Ann Burgess is the queen. And I would say Gregg, except for Ann's husband, Gregg is probably the king. But I don't want to interfere in that situation. Tom, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, and I want to ask you the same thing again. These words, they're super curious. What was your reaction to seeing this?
Well, I'm usually an Occam's razor guy, right? I'm not a conspiracy theorist in general. And so the idea that these three things were written on the bullets, probably 9mm in very small writing, would probably indicate that it's one of the 50 million people who despise United Healthcare, which is exactly how many people they insure in the United States. But we're still running into that same problem. This guy has a meeting. It's known that he's going to be there. Where the meeting's at the Hilton. The Hilton's a perfectly nice hotel. Why wouldn't a stranger danger assassin just assume that he's staying in the Hilton and look for an opportunity elsewhere? I just can't get past what Gregg pointed out earlier, that this has to be someone who has some inside knowledge about where the CEO is staying. And I have a theory about that, but I don't like it because I hate conspiracy theories, but it's one that kind of makes sense. We can get into it whenever you want.
Well, let's get into it.
Okay, so let me introduce some characters into the story here. We have Brian Thompson, the CEO. We have the United Health chairman, a guy named Steve Helmsley. You have the head of HR, Aaron McSweeney, and a chief accounting officer named Tom Ruse. So let's jump back to February this year. These four executives collectively sell $100 million in their shares in United Healthcare. And this is the first time that Brian ever dumped shares since he became CEO. He sold $15 million. Why were these four dumping their shares in February? They had learned right before they dumped the shares, and this is the theory, that the company was under investigation by the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. And DOJ antitrust is a whole separate area of DOJ. I've worked with them in the past when I was an agent. They're under investigation for non-competitive monopolistic practices. But that investigation in February had not gone public. The public did not know. But it's just a matter of time before that comes out. 2 weeks after they dump the shares, it comes out that the DOJ is investigating them for these antitrust violations, and the United Healthcare stock tanks as a result. But it didn't hit those four people because they were able to dump their shares before this public information. Well, that's called insider trading. Now there's an FBI investigation on those four for insider trading. Is it possible in the world of conspiracy theories that someone was worried that Brian would be making a deal to save his own hide and throw his colleagues under the bus? Someone who had insider information about where he was staying and what time he would be walking over to a meeting at the Hilton across the street. I don't like conspiracy theories, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility that something like that happened, because it just feels like an inside job.
Mm-hmm. Let me pull up the super chat and then get Greg and Ann's response. Aaron Hack here. Thank you for this. I have to say thanks for how you started the stream. Brian Thompson is known for helping the Metro Minnesota hospitals from shutting down after COVID relief from the government ended. Worth sharing something positive about him. I agree 100%. And look, I think there's plenty of work to be done with the healthcare system in America, but no one, as I said, deserves to be murdered for that. Greg, what do you make of this? I mean, money is often a big motivating factor in crimes. There is this talk about this alleged DOJ investigation, and that maybe he could even flip on people within the company. How do you know if they're onto something here?
Yeah, this is how investigations should be done. The initial ACH, alternative competing hypotheses. How many ways can we explain a given event? And we've got to keep all those things on the table, and so that we don't get tunnel vision on a given theory or a given hypothesis or a given motive. And then you investigate each one and then see at the end of the day which one the evidence supports. Others will close out. The ones that aren't true, you'll be able to rule them out, down the road. But the things that at least tentatively point in that direction, according to Tom's theory he just put out, would be this inside knowledge. I mean, how did someone know that he was staying at this other hotel, that he would be coming out? I mean, this is something NYPD or DOJ should be working with them to say, hey, this guy was a cooperating witness and he was going to roll, on these guys. I mean, this is important information. And we're all back to what I mentioned at the very beginning, victimology. What elevated this individual's risk for becoming the victim of a violent crime? That's the key. If we can get into that, and that's the key that'll open the lock as to what this is about. And if that, say, let's run with this for a minute, if that's the reality of what we're dealing with, then, this deny and all this, etchings and writing on it. So we're back to the idea that this is just staging to misdirect the investigation and to cover up the real motives. So all of this is still in play. All of this will be sorted out, I hope, and investigated thoroughly in the long run.
Yeah. COE, could you pull that comment back up from KCL? She had information. I didn't realize the price of the room, but it's not a surprise in New York City, I'll tell you that. And we were talking before we went on air, but the meeting was at the Hilton. This all happened on 6th Avenue, which runs uptown, by the way, between 54th and 56th. Yet Brian Thompson stayed at the much more upscale Marriott across the street for a bargain price of $45.95. That is $4,595 a night. That's an average parking spot in New York City. But Ann, this is just so curious because this guy, at first they said he was basically staking out the sidewalk all night, but now new reports say he only got there 5 minutes ahead of time. He had to know that this guy was not at the Hilton, and he had to know what time he was heading over. I mean, what do you make of the fact that the CEO is not staying at the hotel where this is happening?
Well, let's add a third possibility. We're talking theories, and you want to be open-minded to everything. Let's go to the domestic route. Is there a third person involved? Is he staying at this other hotel because he is entertaining someone else? We do know that he and his wife are separated, so that there's no, it's not like he's, I don't know if they're divorced, but they certainly are separated. Mm-hmm. So could somebody would know that. Somebody over at the Marriott would know that he was there. Did he even sign in with his real name? That would be important. That's easy to find out. So that would go down that route, that there could be something else. But I couldn't agree more, that somebody knew that he was over there and that he would be coming across the street to go to the Hilton. And so merely was just waiting there. Now, he might have been waiting there an hour ahead. I think I've heard conflicting times, but he might have been there an hour. The other thing is, what was the person in the car doing? Mm-hmm. Was that he's sitting there with his lights on? So it's not like he could have had his lights off and wouldn't draw attention, but for some reason it was that maybe he was very.
I bet that was an Uber. You
Oh,
know,
was that an Uber?
Oh, okay. I mean, the big black SUV sandwiched between two high-end hotels. It feels like an Uber to me. Sorry.
Yeah. Southern Mom here, Greg, while on his cell phone, could he have been talking to someone inside the hotel, an accomplice giving info on the COE's CEO? I call the COE's my chief of everything, but this is the CEO. But Greg, this is the video we're talking about. You see him on a cell phone. This was released. What do you make of that? Who the hell is he talking to, this guy?
Right.
Well, that's why it's going to be important to crack that burner phone that they've come up with to run that down and find out exactly who he called or who called him, and and get that information. Another thing I would point out as far as theories for him staying at the other hotel, that's not uncommon. I work with the threat assessment group. Park Dietz, a psychiatrist. We do a lot of workplace violence prevention and deal with security issues. It's not uncommon, and I could see his security detail saying, "Don't stay at the hotel where the convention is, because you're going to run into all the conventioneers and they're going to want to hassle you, and it's going to be a problem. Stay over here and in a better room at the $5,000 a night room, and stay away from all that. Don't go over until you have to go over there. Get up, do your thing, and we'll get you out of there." So, that may be the explanation for being at the other hotel. Well, but again, this idea that he knew that he knew he was at the other hotel and seemed to have it timed right. And that could be explained once they crack that cell phone. And then if there is a co-conspirator, well, now we're into maybe Tom's hypothesis or some other one we haven't thought of yet that may come up.
Do we know where the other three of the four executives stayed?
I don't know that. I don't have that information.
But that would be interesting to see if all of them stayed over at the Marriott.
Yeah. And you just brought this up, and I was reluctant to do it earlier, and I'm about to do it again. But you see this comment from our good friend Ned Smith, the wife. So interestingly, we find out that his wife, Paulette, whose nickname is Paulie, that they have been living separately for years, less than a mile apart in Maple Grove, Minnesota. By the way, this CEO made $9.9 million last year with stock, with bonuses. I think his base salary is a paltry $1 million. But Anne, it's difficult. This family's in mourning. At one point, there was love there. But what do you do? What if all this is a deflection and somehow it is connected to family?
You mean as a theory?
Yeah. I mean, you can't rule. From what I've learned from you guys, you can't really rule anyone out.
Yeah, you shouldn't. No, you shouldn't. So that would go with the domestic issue. Yeah, the third theory. You'd want to look at it and see if there's any possible connection there. It sounds like she was asked about this. There was just a tiny bit of media on this, and said that she was just trying to keep the kids calm rather than, and didn't want to answer anything at that particular time. So she did say that she thought he had mentioned about having some threats, but it was very vague. I don't know. I would think she would know more specifically if he was getting threats.
Yeah. Gregg, to you, because you've been in the middle of this so many times. By the way, Dom, where have you been? A new subscriber, great show, great channel. You're getting us on a very average. No, we're getting us on a great night here with some of the best guests that we could possibly have. But Gregg, so the NYPD is reportedly using aviation units, dogs, drones, etc. What is going on inside the NYPD right now with like the chief of detectives? I mean, is he at the office right now? What are they talking about? What are they doing?
They've got a bunch of different teams doing different things. What you're talking about there is the shoe leather approach of getting detectives out in the field. and talking to people. They're going up and down. They're talking to every doorman along that route, and they're going to want to know who's out at, say, 7 in the morning or whenever they think this guy came by. What's that street look like? Pardon me, at that time, who's there? And the doorman is going to say, well, Miss Jones up here, she walks her dog every morning at 7. She was out there. She'll be out there. Jimmy the cab is in the cab stand every morning waiting for a ride. And, Mr. Frank's chauffeur shows up to pick him up to take him to work every morning at that time. They're going to talk to every one of those people. And so they're doing all of that kind of shoe leather work in conjunction with drones and aerial and all the cameras, and they're going to be putting all that together. So the chief of detectives is in there watching and assigning these multiple teams out there doing multiple pieces of this investigation, and that'll include background on him and the victimology, that we've talked about. All of that's under. So it's multiple moving parts going on, and he's constantly getting feedback and then refocusing and reemphasizing and pushing different things out there. He came on a bus, the guns from Connecticut, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, are they literally using like an old school whiteboard, where they write and like kind of flow chart everything? Like, how do you keep track of this?
You keep track of that on computers so that everything is cross-referenced, right?
Yeah.
Every name, everything is cross-referenced, and you can index and pull it up. So
Yeah, Joel, you dinosaur.
Gregg got back at me because I mentioned that he entered the FBI when I was 6 months old. So that was his getting back at me.
I've been waiting for that. I've been waiting for that up.
I always say Gregg is the one guy you definitely want to have a beer with. The guy's got stories for days. Unterweger, what was his first name? Gregg chased a serial
Jack
Unterweger. I did a show with Gregg a while back. It's a show we were doing, where we're talking about the biggest cases that our best guests had, and Gregg was chasing a serial killer through Europe, so that was part of his life story as well. Tom, to you, so apparently this guy, according to the Wall Street Journal, did have a security detail. We don't know if it was one or multiple, but obviously they were not with him when he walked over to the hotel, which is when you think that they would be with him. What do you think's going on there?
Again, the most simple explanation would be that nobody thought it would be a big deal for him to walk across the street from one hotel to another, which proved to be a fatal error. But you could see how somebody would make that fatal error when they get lazy and just feel a sense of comfort.
Yeah. It's just, I'm fascinated by listening to these people trying to figure it out themselves in real time. But Anne, one of the things here, Minnetonka, I think it is. Minnetonka, Minnesota is where the headquarters are for United Healthcare. And this summer, I believe it was, there were some really large protests there. Well over 100 demonstrators at the company's headquarters. 11 demonstrators were arrested. There was an organization, like a grassroots organization called the People's Action Institute. They put out a statement saying, we know there's a crisis of gun violence in America. This is after the murder, by the way. There's also a crisis of denials of care by private health insurance corporations, including United Health. What do you do about these protests? I mean, a lot of times these protesters are younger people. The shooter appears to be younger. They've got a bone to pick, an axe to grind, whatever cliche you want to use. But what about the relevance of these protests at the headquarters?
Well, I think this is important to try to find out whether these are the professional protesters that, go from city to city and have no real connection with whatever the issue is, or are these healthcare workers that really feel this and are protesting that. I think that would make a huge difference in the composition of the 100 or however many there were. But this is the protesting of healthcare is a very serious issue. It is going on, and as already pointed out, that they were the highest deniers, if you will. That healthcare was denier of healthcare requests. So I think that all, whether there had been any kind of a plan put together to address it, which is, I think what you're saying is, how do you handle protesters and their grievances? It's got to be handled, and just to ignore it obviously is not the answer.
This, by the way, obviously is the fallen CEO, very young guy, a lot less gray hair than me, 50 years old, and not with us anymore. He does have 2 sons, one out of high school, one still in high school, both said to be really good athletes. Gregg McCrary, by the way, STS Nation, please give us your questions with the triple Qs, and I'll throw them to the guests as we continue to move forward here for a few more minutes. But Gregg, I'm curious, killer smile, you see this real relaxed, that's one angle. And I think you see it in the second shot. Look, if it was me and I was carrying out a crime, I'd be super anxious, terrified. I'm that way on a daily basis. How is this guy so relaxed?
Well, again, we don't know the exact environment. I think that's at the hostel. Somebody may have been making a joke or whatever. But again, if we're talking about this more cold psychopathic personality, they're just devoid of this, that kind of care or concern or anxiety. They're pretty calm, planning the murders and carrying it out and all of that. So, yeah, it's, I wouldn't read too much into that. I think it's just, just who he is. He's comfortable with who he is and what he's, what he's about, at that point.
Yeah. And just back to you. So, in the profiling word, there's kind of this idea of a signature versus a modus operandi. When you're talking about the bullets, do you think this person was potentially trying to leave some sort of, signature as to, reason for doing this?
Oh, well, yes, I think that it means something, whether it means something really personal to him or whether this is for the investigators to see and to throw them off. I think that's the important thing. Is it's very strange that you would have bullets written on. How many? I guess I'd have to ask Tom and Gregg, have you ever seen cases where they have written something on the casing like this?
I did it before the show to see if it was possible. And
is it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd used a Sharpie and my handwriting's pretty terrible, but I was able to write the word deny on a 9mm casing. So
Okay. Wow. It wasn't easy, was it?
No, no, and my penmanship's really bad. So maybe this guy went to Catholic school and has really good penmanship.
Yeah. Gregg, what about you? Have you seen that in a case before?
No, I haven't. I mean, we've seen guys leave letters and notes, and I've seen them write on the back of victims' bodies and, all of that, but I haven't seen this particular thing before. But again, to kind of go back what we've been talking about, I mean, it could be a direct reveal of the motive, or it could be the staging to misdirect the investigation and mislead investigators away from the actual motive. So all that has to be being considered and investigated in all those different avenues simultaneously.
This is a comment that I normally would not bring up, but I'm going to bring it up because this is out there very publicly. A lot of people making comments like this. And why would this panel assume he's a psychopath? I don't think anyone said that, by the way. He's a vigilante. I understand being against vigilantes if you are rich. Otherwise, most of us want this guy to get away scot-free. Jennifer, I can tell you categorically that you are wrong. I do not agree with you at all, but I appreciate the comment nevertheless. But and I mean, it struck me for a number of reasons. Again, just the vitriol towards this guy is real. Yeah. And it's not him. He's the figurehead for the healthcare system, right? Right. So that's one aspect. But the other is how do you identify this guy? Is he a sociopath, a psychopath, a vigilante? I mean, how do you know how to categorize him?
Right. That he can do this in such cold blood, if you will, or in such a cold way, certainly points to the lack of emotion. I think we've looked at that and even watched it. That it's very cool and calculated, but that doesn't necessarily translate into his personality. That there is, I think that the grievance is so great about that he feels justified in what he's doing, and that doesn't necessarily mean that he's a psychopath. So I think that we would need to obviously see him and get more background on him. I think it's interesting that he doesn't use the 3 words that are the title of the book by that Rutgers professor. So that whether that's just he didn't have the book with him, and so he couldn't quite remember, or something like that. That's the only 2 out of the 3. Or he's just being misleading. But it's a book that's over 2010, so it's a good 15 years ago, and someone has to really have known this book to have even used it. So I find that is very, very curious of what that all means, and would be something, once he is found, to see if you can find out what. He would be one that you would definitely want to interview to get some good answers, like what Gregg and the other profilers did in their work at Quantico.
Yeah, shout out to Susan Hicks, by the way, good friend of the show from Tallahassee, who helps us behind the scenes with the Dan Markel case. From Jersey, Jen, where have you been? Great state of New Jersey. But Ann, I was thinking the same thing here. Why is one of the words wrong? That's interesting.
I can speak to that, actually.
Yeah,
the term deny, depose, and defend is something that insurance companies, in particular in their legal departments, discuss a lot. And it's kind of an inside industry term for how to make money running an insurance company. You're going to deny the claim, you're going to litigate the claim, and then you're going to defend it in court and to not pay the claim. It didn't come out of Jay Feinman's forehead. This is a term of art in the insurance industry.
Well, what does the depose mean then?
Depose means that you feel free to go into civil litigation and take depositions in a
okay.
okay.
Gregg McCrary, I don't know if you know the answer to this one, but they want to know if New York City has an AI citywide surveillance system. Do they have a way of monitoring using AI? And by the way, interestingly, I read that this company, through Brian Thompson's suggestion, was using AI themselves in order to be able to deny claimants their medical rights. So that's kind of a full circle moment. But what about AI in the city, Gregg?
I don't know for sure, but I'm just, again, free associating. And let me go back to another issue that we've kind of talked around a little bit. The weapon had this silencer, this suppression device on it. What the city does have are these shot spotter, they're acoustic gathering information, so they can detect a gunshot and be able to triangulate where that came from, dispatch officers, right away. So the use of the suppression device, the silencer, may be an attempt to avoid triggering that shot spotter thing and to delay the response so that the cops aren't immediately coming into that area. Again, I don't want to give this guy too much credit or overanalyze this, but that may be it. And if nothing else, just to keep it quiet on the street, so you're not attracting a lot of attention immediately. It's going to be busy. It's not quite 7, but things are moving. Things are always moving in the city. And to keep it down, keep the shot down. Otherwise, the 9mm has a pretty good report, and it's going to get attention for sure.
I agree with Michelle Salter here, just because it's such a divisive issue. It's in the news, and when you look at this guy, not to profile, but I'm with a bunch of profilers. But when we look at this guy, he does have, and I'm not one to really speak, but this guy has a bit of an effeminate air to him. So it's definitely something that I think is curious at the very least. Another thing that everyone's asking about, Tom Simon, and you're the money guy. This guy's worth, I think, over $100 million. The family is obviously very well off. Why? I know the NYPD's got the reward out. It's only $10,000. Why such a low reward when money talks? Why hasn't the family jumped in? Or is that an unfair question?
It's not an unfair question, but it's based on a false premise. At the FBI, we did a study. There's absolutely zero correlation between the amount of reward offered and the quality or amount of tips that come in the door. $10,000 brings in the exact same amount of tips as $10 million from anyone who knows something.
Wow, that's fascinating. COE, you go missing, I'm putting up $1. You just heard it here. But go ahead.
Remember, Bin Laden had what, $100 million bounty on his head, and it took a CIA informant to actually sell him out. So there's just no correlation.
Interesting. That's fascinating. I did not know that at all. Someone's asking why I didn't have multiple bodyguards. Interesting question earlier. Forgive me, I forget who asked it, but and to you, 3 shots were fired. One hits him, the fatal shot in the back, but he gets shot in the calf. You think the calf shot is just a bad shot, or a warning to him that he's about to go down?
That's a good question. I guess it would depend on which of the 3 it was. Well, where did the first shot go? Was that the first shot, or just
that's a good question because I don't know. Tom, do you happen to know?
Yeah, I have. I don't know which of the 3 shots. I don't think anyone will know which of the 3. But Gregg and I know that when you got too much finger inside it and you jerk the trigger, it's going to pull low and to the left. So I wouldn't be surprised that it's his left calf coming from behind that probably took one of the shots when he's rushing the trigger. I mean, his heartbeat's racing a mile a minute. He looks like a cool customer to us, but it's a pretty terrifying experience to pull a trigger into someone's back. Right. So I think what happened is it was a simple miss, and that's where you miss when you miss.
Mm-hmm. And he was moving too. You see him moving along while he's shooting.
Right.
So
yeah. Gregg McCrary, is this guy still in New York City? Is he on a plane to Vietnam? Where is this guy, and what's he thinking right now?
Is he at the bus stop?
Yeah. Well, I wish I knew. If I had the answer, we'd be way ahead of the game. With that one,
we'd have 10 grand to split between the 4 of us.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I mean, on kind of a more serious note, though, Gregg, I mean, for someone like this, who's this cool, calm, and collected, is there anything you look at in terms of like post-crime behavior? Are you expecting him to act a certain way, or is he gonna commit the crime again on someone else?
Well, I think this certainly appears to be a targeted crime. Now, whether he's going to target someone else, it's hard to know. But I think you'd look at we always say past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. How did he come to town? Well, apparently they know he came to town on a bus. And that may well be, and again, I don't know how, but it may be putting together this facial recognition at Port Authority terminal. Maybe they got him coming off a bus. Maybe they're able to do something like that. And I think they would be looking at that same stuff to see if he took a bus out of town. It seems to be his comfort zone, what he's comfortable doing. I don't think he, knew that they knew he came in on a bus, so he may feel comfortable in just going back and being in that socioeconomic thing and the hostels and buses, and that seems to be his comfort zone. So I would think he would probably be staying there in his known comfort zone than going out and doing something new.
Yeah. By the way, this is a great question that I hadn't thought of, which there are a lot of questions I haven't thought of. But Ann, to you, when we do watch this video, he shoots him in the back. We had Rob D'Amico on, who was part of the FBI's HRT team and is probably one of the better shots around. He was saying, if it was a professional hit, the person would have come up 2 inches behind his head, a headshot, and is sure. And I don't want to get so graphic, but there is no way, I don't think, from this for him to know that he is no longer with us. This is the beginning of it. He just takes the shot. The CEO crumples to the ground, but he doesn't know for sure he's dead. What does that tell you?
I thought keep watching. Doesn't he go up and then he's looking? I think, and then he turns left. I thought he did check to see if he was down. Not that he would know if he was dead, but knew that he was down.
Yeah, I think he definitely knew he was down, but I don't think there's any way, Gregg, I mean, what do you think? Do you think there's any way he knew for sure? And by the way, he did die shortly thereafter, but I don't think he was fatally injured immediately.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any way to know for sure. And that brings to mind another thing, which I had heard that the rounds were full metal jacket rounds, which isn't the round you use if you're trying to kill people. I mean, not that you want to get shot with that; it's fatal, obviously. But a real assassin would be using hollow points or something that would do more internal damage than the full metal jacket round. So again, don't want to overinterpret that necessarily, but if those reports are true, then it suggests he didn't have the most efficient round in there to kill folks. But he definitely knew he put them down. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. Which also maybe goes to the fact that he's not a pro. Dippity do, this is just an interesting comment. I'm sorry you're going through this, but very timely to the discussion. I currently need 2 surgeries. I pay $1,400 a month for health insurance for my family of 4 and can't get the surgeries because of out-of-pocket cost will be too much. I mean, Tom, you're the money man here. Look, money is a huge stressor on families. I just looked it up. Because I have a family of 5 and I wanted my kids to know, but the average income for a family of 5 in America is between $64,000 and $68,000 a year. What about this? I mean, just the fact that there's so much financial stress, and then you throw in the healthcare system on top of it. You gotta think that maybe this is a motive.
You could certainly, and that would certainly be the most simple explanation, especially given what was written on the bullets, on the shell casings, rather. The idea that this is someone who had a claim denied, whose mother died, maybe with having a claim denied, and this, or someone who's just a real believer in socialized medicine who wants to fight the power and take out this symbol of greed in the healthcare industry. It's entirely possible that's the case. That's probably the most likely explanation. But we need to open our minds to the idea that it's a decoy and that they're creating the illusion that that's what they care about. And I just can't get past the insider job thing. How did this guy know that the CEO was coming out of that hotel at that point in time to walk across the street?
Yeah. So, Tom, let me ask you though. So, going with that assumption, that's an insider job. Who are the insiders? Do you think it's the coworkers or the family or what?
Disgruntled former employee, somebody who has really got it out for this guy. Could be a paramour, like Ann was saying. Again, the list of people who know this guy may be something. It could be my theory about this insider trading case, and maybe someone wants to shut up the CEO. Again, that's a real Hollywood type of explanation, but we can't discount it.
Yeah, I'm going to get to the money questions in a second, which is, who is this guy? I'm going to ask Gregg and Ann that in a minute. But Ann, this guy apparently stole an ID. At first, it was reported as a fake ID to get into the hostel. So he goes to that trouble, but then he goes to a Starbucks and has his fingerprints everywhere. What does it tell you? Because on the one hand, he's cautious. On the other hand, he's completely cavalier about what he's doing.
Yeah, he's absolutely. It's very inconsistent, and I think that's makes it harder to try to really figure out whether he is just staging all of this or whether he is just careless. And I would say you want to know who the photo ID is. That's important because he had to borrow it from someone. So did he find it? Did he bring it to him from Atlanta? That's the other thing, is that they find out that he gets the bus in Atlanta, tells us they know a lot about who he is. Did he get the gun down there? Did he get the gun up here? How does he get? I guess on the bus you can carry a gun, and they don't check a gun. So it's not like an airline where you would never be able to do that.
That's a good point.
But so some of that is well planned, I think, and.
Yeah.
How well planned is I still go back to what you all are talking about in terms of who knew he was there.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a $64,000 question.
Right. And the other thing, I'm sure that Gregg said that you would be checking who would try to call for his room. Did that's the way they learned where he was? Did they call the Hilton and say, is there a Mr. Thompson registered here? Or, in some way use that as a way to gather information. But it sounds more like they just knew. And the phone call would be critical to see who he was talking to that morning.
Interesting question here, Gregg from Mar Plum here. Any speculation why the shooter decided to shoot the CEO from the back, not from the front? That's an interesting choice. You could have just as easily come up on him and taken, let's say, a headshot or a shot directly to the chest. What's your thinking there?
Again, I think he was just waiting for him. He came out of the door, turned right, started down the street, and he just came up behind him. And he never saw it coming. So it wouldn't be as though, you could approach him front on and then, there might be a struggle or he might balk or something. You just got him in the back and the poor guy never saw it coming, never had any idea.
Yeah. Brooklyn Pasola has been all over this because she's from Brooklyn, which is in New York, one of the boroughs. It's being reported a female employee was flirting with the shooter and asked him to take down his mask so she could see his handsome face. That's where the smiling photo has come from. I don't know if someone actually spoke to the flirtatious employee, but this again is the photo. Another issue that came up earlier, Tom Simon, is there any possibility that he's wearing some sort of like a skin mask to literally mask his face?
I don't buy it. It feels too Hollywood, too corny. Not buying it at all.
There you go.
Yeah.
This is coming from the or retired FBI agent. I sort of asked you this before, Gregg, but let me go back to it. Is this the kind of person who, in your opinion, is going to unalive himself if he is cornered?
Take himself out?
Yeah.
Again, we don't know that much about him really to know exactly what he might be, what the issues are going on with him. I mean, you'd certainly be concerned about that, be concerned about he certainly has the potential for violence. There's no doubt about that. Whether he externalizes that and chooses to shoot law enforcement or takes it out on himself, it's just hard to know. But you'd certainly, if you were law enforcement going in to make the arrest, you'd be thinking about all of that and preparing for all of that for sure.
Yeah. This is an interesting question, Tom. This is more your alley here. Do you think the shooting could have been just a few more minutes and we're going to wrap it up? If I was paying Ann, Tom, or Gregg, I would need to have the CEO's salary to do that. But luckily they come on voluntarily. Do you think the shooting, Tom, could have been paid and found for on the dark web? If so, cash would probably not be used on that. Interesting point. How real is this dark web, Tom Simon? Can you really go there and find a hitman?
I think it's a bit of a boogeyman. I mean, you should be able to go there to buy weed, but I think I would be very skeptical of anyone who wanted me to wire transfer them or send them Bitcoin with the claim that they're an assassin who I can hire on the dark web. Again, more Hollywood nonsense, not real life.
There you
Most
go.
of the people out there who try to hire hitmen end up getting an undercover FBI agent or undercover cop. So
Exactly right. Yeah. That's why I think, this idea that, maybe some person, I don't know, maybe his wife or somebody hired a hitman. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, as Tom said, almost invariably you end up with an undercover FBI agent or a cop or somebody that, that fills the void there, and then the whole thing goes south.
Yeah. Someone asking if the smile could be revenge, and Gregg already said, the context, we don't really know. True Lifestyles, friend of the show. If a person can't afford healthcare, how can they afford a hitman? That's a good point there. Very good point. Ann Burgess, what about two more quick questions and we'll get final thoughts. What about the media factor here? Everyone and their mother, including me, is covering this. Is this something that you think the shooter got to know about it, but do you think he's enjoying it?
Yes, I do. I think that there is the secondary satisfaction that he gets, not only the shooting, but then he's being covered. How far did they cover him? Did they ever get to where the bicycle? Did they have him on that? And you have to know how to ride a bicycle, especially in New York. So,
well, they did get him there. They got him coming out of Central Park. I don't know the sequences. Tom, do you know?
I mean, yeah, I mean, they pretty much been able to track his route. These e-bikes that you can rent, which a lot of them are rented with credit cards. So I'd be curious to see what the financial investigation there is. They all basically have GPSs on them. That's how you know where to pick up an e-bike on the app. And this guy rode up into Central Park and I think dumped the bike in there in Central Park. I'm sure they have the bike by now.
Yeah.
So, Tom Simon, as we wrap up here, huge thanks to Tom, who's with the FBI for over 2 decades, now has Tom Simon Investigations, and is all around good guy. And you hear Occam's razor, that basically means the simplest answer is the answer, which is probably a very smart way to look at this. You said before you think that this is solved. Thank you, Dana B. Every day is fascinating and crazy, I will add, at STS. Thank you, Dana. It means a lot, actually. Or Dana. Not sure. I went to high school with a Dana. But Tom, what are you expecting? You said within 24 hours, this guy will be caught. Give me, I know you're not a profiler per se like these two. Give me an age range of this guy, who you think he is.
He looks young, right? He looks like he's 25 years old to me, and if he was anything above 25, it would look really weird for him to be staying in like a youth hostel in Manhattan. So I don't think this guy is some John Wick character who's a master assassin. But I do think he did a lot of solid planning on this. I'm 60-40. I say 60% he's just an activist, and it's exactly what it looks like. 40% that he has some sort of inside connection, maybe a disgruntled former employee, or my nightmare scenario of someone bumping him off to stop him from testifying in this insider trading case. I think most likely Occam's razor is always where I go to, that he's an activist of some kind. Yeah,
this is a funny but interesting comment to me. He's probably back home in Greenwich. For those who do not know, Greenwich is one of the wealthiest towns in Connecticut. Next door is New Canaan, which is where David Letterman lives, just to give you an idea. But what about that, Anne? What if this is some, idealistic ideologue, early 20s who wants health care for everyone, but does come from an incredibly wealthy family? Is that a possibility?
Sure, it's a possibility. I wouldn't rule it out. I think that we try to tell everybody to keep an open mind, try to look at every possible option, and then rule out as you get more information in. And we just don't have the information at that right now. But he could have fooled everybody by just walking over, from Greenwich and staying at that hostel. But it shows a lot of planning. I think it's really important to say he does have a lot of planning. The gun, you can't deny that. Although somebody said that this is a common gun. Is that true? Is that easy to get?
It's not hard to get, but it's not a very common gun. This is not a Glock. This is not a Smith & Wesson. This is a fairly rare gun. I don't think it ever really took off because it's a pain in the neck to use because you have to rack it every time you fire. So it's a gun that was built for veterinary purposes for putting down animals.
And he did it 3 times. Did we see him do it 3 times?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. From Croissant, Gregg, exclamation. The law firm I used to work for hired Gregg as an expert many times. He's the coolest. There you go.
There you go.
Just what I paid Croissant to say. Exactly.
For those who do not know, now you know, as they say, Agent Gregg McCrary, he entered the FBI as a special agent December 1st, 1969. He has done it all, chasing serial killers through Europe, chasing mobsters through New York City. How's a guy like that not cool? He wrote a book, The Unknown Darkness, profiling the predators among us. Greg, give us your bottom line profile. I know you don't have all the information, but is this a 25-year-old rich kid, a 25-year-old disgruntled kid? Is this someone hired by the family? Who do you think this guy is?
I think it's probably going to be, I'm kind of aligned with Tom's thoughts on this. I think this is a young kid who may be more ideologically motivated. And there may be some personal issue. I mean, maybe his mother died because she couldn't get coverage, or it could be someone just more ideologically motivated and trying to make a statement, but very clever to the degree they could be. Again, at that young age, they don't have a lot of experience doing this. So he tried his best. He got good info, got good intel. We can't deny that, and carried this thing off. And so far is eluded apprehension. But again, I'm with Tom. I can't imagine this is going to go on much longer with the amount of information pouring in.
Yeah, that was my next question. Would you be shocked if tomorrow night at this time he is still not found?
I would be, I would assume by tomorrow night they either have him in custody or have a know exactly who he is and have a big fugitive hunt underway, and it's not going to last long. I can't imagine it's going to last much longer.
Look at this from Lucky Duck. Ann, huge fan. You're an inspiration to all women, and your work is amazing and has changed the whole system. Thank you. For those who do not know, now you know this too. Dr. Ann Burgess is a friend of the show, a friend of mine. She came to my book signing, which meant the world to me. She's an internationally recognized pioneer in the assessment and treatment of victims of trauma and abuse. She's the author of A Killer by Design, literally named a living legend by the American Academy of Nursing, still teaching actively at the Boston College School of Nursing. Same question, Amber, just putting you on the spot here. Who is this person?
Yeah, who is he? I don't think he's very old. Maybe as much as late 20s, as I would say, but certainly 20 to 30. He stays at a hostel. That's not a very easy place to stay if you're a rich person, as we were talking about. So I'm not sure I'd say he's from Greenwich or anything like that. But I do think that there's a health issue, that there's a grievance out there, that it has something to do with being denied insurance for something. And it could be as simple as a transgender, not necessarily for him, but maybe for someone that he cares about or is in the family. So I think that there is a connection. And it will be very interesting to see how it all ends up, and whether they're going to get him in the next 24 hours is, sure hope they do, to make it all look like we know what we're doing here.
By the way, these are literally some of the best at what they do in the world, this panel, and that is not an exaggeration. Just a quick humble ask: if you enjoyed the show, please hit that like button. Please subscribe. We have a Patreon link as well that really goes a long way in putting out this content, which is a never-ending endeavor. I've got a book that'll change the way you look at life. It's about my mother, who's a child Holocaust survivor, but also 85% of the book is her screaming and yelling at me, giving me life advice. And she's going to yell at me. She's going to say, "Why did you wear a hat with Dr. Ann and Special Agent McCrary? Do you have no respect?" To which I'm going to say, I've been working so hard, I couldn't take a shower and I had bedhead, so I had to wear a hat. So that's my answer to her on that. Tomorrow, by the way, 12:30 p.m., you got America's most respected detective, Phil Waters, with a clearance rate of 96%. He's going to be investigating the investigators on this, along with Scott Duffy. We're going to look at this through another set of investigative eyes. And then we're staying on this. If there's a break in the case, we'll come back on next week. Donna Adelson, the matriarch of the Adelson family, accused of murdering Dan Markel back in 2014. She heads back to court next week, and we're going to be doing a bunch of shows on that and staying with this story again. Huge thanks to Tom and Gregg. Guys, stick around 1 second. Love you, America. And let's think tonight whether you have a grievance or not with the healthcare system. This is a guy who lost his life at just 50 years old with two sons who I'm sure are crying and sobbing, trying to make sense of it all. So with that, we'll see you tomorrow. Guys, stick around 1 second.